Order this regular meeting of the Lincoln Lancaster County Planning Commission of May 26th, 2021. Please note that in absence of the Planning Commission Chair, Tracy Corr, she officially appointed me to serve as the Vice Chair for this hearing. A printed agenda is available outside the hearing room, and a copy of the full agenda, including the staff reports, is available at the front of the chambers with the clerk. The Open Meetings Act is posted just inside the doors at the back of the room. If you've parked in the parking garage across the street to the north, the gate is open and no parking coupons are needed. Out of courtesy for those attending this meeting, the commissioners and the staff, cell phone usage is not permitted in these chambers during any portion of this meeting. We appreciate your cooperation. The Planning Commission action today is final on the following items. 1.3 special permit number 21014, 1.4 special permit 21015, 1.5 special permit 21016, and 4.1b special permit 143A. Any aggrieved person may appeal the final action of the Planning Commission to the City Council or to the County Board by filing a notice of appeal with the clerk within 14 days following the action of the Planning Commission. The Planning Commission action on all other items is recommended to the City Council or County Board. The first item of business is the approval of the minutes of the regular meeting held May 12, 2021. Is there a motion?
So moved. Campbell.
Second, Edgerton.
Okay. Ball,
So I was absent. Do I get to vote on?
did
on
you
that?
read the minutes?
Yes. Okay. Approve.
Okay.
Yes.
Campbell,
Yes.
Edgerton,
Yes.
Joy,
Yes.
Ryman Yost,
Yes.
Shear.
Yes.
Motion carried 6-0.
The next item of business is the consent agenda. Items on the consent agenda will be called at the same time and will not be scheduled for a separate public hearing unless there is a request from someone wishing to speak or at the request of a commission member. I will ask Jerry to read all of the consent agenda items into record. Once those items are read, she will ask us if there is anyone wishing to speak. If you wish to speak on an item on the consent agenda, we would ask that you stand and state that item. That item will then be removed from the consent agenda and scheduled as a separate public hearing under Section 3 of today's agenda. All items remaining on the consent agenda will be voted upon in total with a motion for approval. Jerry, will you please call the items of the consent agenda?
Yes, thank you. Before I do that, I would just note that we received a written request on behalf of the applicant for a 2-week deferral of agenda item 1.4, special permit 21015. Therefore, this item is being removed from the consent agenda for separate action. First item is item 1.1A, miscellaneous 12004, to review the proposed determination that the Belmont neighborhood redevelopment area be declared blighted and substandard as defined by the Nebraska Community Development Law. The study area is approximately 2,200 acres and is generally bounded by Superior Street on the north, I-180 on the west, Sun Valley Boulevard, and Cornhusker Highway on the south, and North 27th Street on the east. Miscellaneous 21005 is to review the proposed determination and identifying areas of the city that meet the statutory definition of extremely blighted as defined in the Nebraska Community Development Law. The study area is approximately 2,200 acres and is generally bounded by Superior Street on the north, I-180 on the west, Sun Valley Boulevard and Cornhusker Highway on the south, and North 27th Street on the east. Item 1.2A is miscellaneous 21006 to review the proposed determination that the Northwest 48th Street redevelopment area be declared blighted and substandard as defined in the Nebraska Community Development Law. The study is approximately 1,754 acres and is generally bounded by Fletcher Avenue on the north, Northwest 57th Street on the west, Holdridge Street on the south, and Northwest 48th Street on the east. And the associated miscellaneous 21007 to review the proposed determination and identifying areas of the city that meet the statutory definition of extremely blighted as defined in the Nebraska Community Development law. This study area is approximately 1,754 acres and is generally bounded by Fletcher Avenue on the northwest 57th Street on the west, Holdridge Street on the south, and northwest 48th Street on the east. Next item is item 1.3, special permit 21014 to allow for the sale of alcohol for consumption on the premises on property generally located at 3410 South 10th Street. Item 1.5 is special permit 21016 to allow for the sale of alcohol for consumption both on and off the premises on property generally located at 6700 North 27th Street. And I would note that on both special permits, this is final action unless appealed to the City Council within 14 days. Are there any ex parte communications to be disclosed on these items?
No, there is not.
Are there any ex parte communications that took place or additional information you learned while visiting these sites?
No, we're clear.
Is there anyone here wishing to speak on any of these consent agenda items? If so, please stand and state that desire.
Okay. I would entertain a motion.
I would move that we approve the consent agenda.
Second, Edgerton.
Okay.
Okay. This is for the approval of all items on the consent agenda with the exception of item 1.4. Ball?
Yes.
Campbell?
Yes.
Edgerton?
Yes.
Joy?
Yes.
Ryman Yost?
Yes.
Shear?
Yes.
Motion carried 6-0.
I will now ask Jerry to call any requests for deferral received prior to this hearing.
Okay, we have received a written request on behalf of the applicant for a 2-week deferral of item 1.4, special permit 21015 to allow for a community unit plan with up to 36 dwelling units on approximately 0.988 acres with requested waivers on property generally located at North 25th and Vine Streets. This would defer public hearing and action to the June 9th Planning Commission hearing.
Move to defer till June 9th, item 1.4.
Second, Paul.
Thank you.
Okay, this is for the deferral. Ball?
Yes.
Campbell?
Yes.
Edgerton?
Yes.
Joy?
Yes.
Ryman Yost?
Yes.
Shear?
Yes.
Motion carried 6-0. Is there anyone here wishing to testify on this special permit at this point in time rather than waiting until the 9th of June? Don't see anyone. Okay, moving on, we did also receive a written request for a 2-week deferral of agenda items 4.1A and B. First item being change of zone 21016 from R1 to H4, and the associated special permit 14003A to allow for the expansion of the existing special permit for planned service commercial to allow for an additional approximate 21,000 square feet of commercial floor area. Both of these are on property generally located at South 70th Street and Pine Lake Road. The deferral would delay the public hearing or continue the public hearing to the June 9th Planning Commission hearing.
Move to defer change of zone 21016 and special permit 14003A.
Second, Edgerton.
Thank you.
Okay, this is for the deferral of the change of zone and special permit. Ball?
Yes.
Campbell?
Yes.
Edgerton?
Yes.
Joy?
Yes.
Ryman Yost?
Yes.
Shear?
Abstain.
Motion carried 5-0. Okay, is there anyone here wishing to testify on these two applications at this time rather than waiting until June 9th? Seeing none.
Okay. We will now proceed to public hearings. Prior to staff making a brief presentation, each staff person should state their name, agency, and address. The applicant will then be requested to present his or her testimony, followed by those who wish to testify in support, followed by those who wish to testify in opposition. The staff will then be given an opportunity to respond to the testimony, and then the applicant shall have an opportunity for rebuttal. Each person testifying should state their name and address and shall have 5 minutes to speak. unless additional time is requested and granted. The timer will go off after 4 minutes. The clerk will then indicate you have 1 minute remaining to wrap up your testimony. Once the final minute has lapsed, the clerk will indicate that your time is up. If during your testimony you have copies of documents or materials you would like to have distributed to the Planning Commission members or included as part of the record, please provide them to the clerk. The Planning Commission will vote immediately at the close of the public hearing unless the commission votes to defer action or continue the public hearing. Jerry, would you please call the first public hearing item?
Yes, before I do that, I would note that Commissioner Campbell has declared a conflict of interest on change of zone 04075I and therefore has recused himself for this portion of the hearing. Okay, the item is change of zone 04075I to amend the existing Village Gardens planned unit development for the construction of multiple family dwelling units with waivers to adjust height and parking on property generally located at 56th Street and Pine Lake Road. Staff recommendation is conditional approval. Are there any ex parte communications to be disclosed?
Yes.
Had a conversation with a Village Gardens resident about 2 weeks ago, which was mostly about protocols and how to testify during COVID, which is not relevant today, so just wanted to make that known.
Thank you.
Excellent.
Noted. Are there any ex parte communications that took place or additional information you learned while visiting the site to be disclosed?
Nope, we're good.
Good.
Okay. Good afternoon, Brian Will, Planning Department, City of Lincoln, 555 South 10th Street. So let me start by putting up an exhibit here. So Village Gardens, probably most everybody knows where it's at, but just in case. Pine Lake Road, South 56, so we're located southeast of the intersection, South 56 and Pine Lake Road. Probably most familiar by Campbell's Nursery located at the intersection. Village Gardens was one of a handful of PUDs that were brought through the process and approved early mid-2000s, planned unit developments. Incorporated a lot of principles of new urbanism. I wasn't involved with this one at the beginning, but my recollection is that an outside consultant was hired, brought in, that was familiar with principles of new urbanism and tried to incorporate some of those into the development, such as compact development, mixed use, good pedestrian connectivity. And so this was originally approved back in 2004. So today we're talking about the property in question really that we're talking about today is this lot right here. So Pine Lake Road is to the north. We move south a little bit. Bobley Lane, which is an entrance into Village Gardens, South 56th. There's a large empty lot here, and the applicant is proposing to build an apartment complex there. So we're not really talking about major changes to the site plan for the PUD. What we're really talking about is an amendment to the development plan. So Village Gardens, maybe just briefly, let me explain that, has really two major components. One would be the site plan, the plan sheet for the preliminary plat and the PUD. The second component, which we're talking about today, is the development plan. That is, as part of the PUD, they modified a lot of the zoning regulations that normally would apply to create this unique development that has been under development since then. So we're talking about today about modifying that development plan. So I pointed out that site specifically because when we start talking about the development plan, now I know this is sort of hard to see, but I want to illustrate here two things. This area right here, if you can kind of see that shading, is the area known as the Village Center. Adjacent to it here, which is mostly residential uses if you drive through there, is the Neighborhood Center. I point those two out because those are the only two areas where multifamily dwellings that we're talking about today are approved, or allowed, rather. And actually, only in the Neighborhood Center, according to the plan, way down here at the southern boundary along Yankee Hill Road. So really, the only area within the development at this point in time, apartments are allowed, is within the Village Center. And that's where, if you drive through there, you see that that's where the shops, the stores, the restaurants, the convenience store are located. So as a PUD, there's always going to be underlying zoning, and that's the case here as well. And so we have two underlying zoning designations for the PUD. The Village Center is the B3 area here, designated by green. Disregard this line.
Okay.
That's to demarcate the Neighborhood Center is all it's there for. But everything else in yellow here in Village Gardens is R3. And so it's in this area here, the commercial center. This lot on the southern boundary is where we're talking about today for the proposed apartments. And so what Village Gardens did back in 2004, they adopted the requirements of the B3 district and the R3 district as part of their development plan, and then modified them in some respects. And so how did they modify them? Well, we're going to talk about two of them here today, which is really the focus of why we're here. This amendment is about two changes. Like I said, we're not really changing the site plan per se. This is page 25 out of the development plan, that book of regulations for Village Gardens. There's two changes proposed. One is here, proposing to modify the allowed height for apartments in the Village Center from 40 feet to 55 feet. And the second one is to reduce the required parking for apartments from 1.5 spaces to 1. So as I described in the staff report, that second one that I just mentioned, the adjustment to the parking requirement from 1.5 to 1, is actually not an amendment to the zoning regulations. Currently, in the zoning ordinance, it has been this way for decades, the parking requirement for a dwelling in the B3 is 1 space per unit. Now, why they originally included 1.5 per unit, I can't explain that, and maybe the owners or the applicant can. So when we're looking at something like this, our interest is in making sure they meet the requirements, provide that minimum. If somebody wants to provide more than that, I don't, generally don't have an issue with it. So, like I said, so I can't explain that, but, so that one is technically not a waiver to the ordinance. It's just amending the development plan to go down to 1 space per dwelling unit. And so my response is, why did we support that? That is the requirement in the ordinance. That is the community standard that has been adopted by the city council and the community at large. So we have no cause to require anything beyond that. The other is a waiver to the requirements of the zoning ordinance, and that's a waiver to the height from 40 to 55 feet. And so as I noted in the staff report, those waivers like that are always reviewed on a case-by-case basis. And so as we look at this development, this one sort of ticks all the boxes. It's multifamily adjacent to a little commercial center. It has good accessibility to major arterial streets without having to travel through a neighborhood. It serves as a good transitional use from those more commercial and mixed uses to the neighboring residential. And it has been a trend for the last 10-plus years that we have been approving apartments in excess of what the code requires, granting waivers to do that. I'd suggest that one of the reasons we do that is where it's appropriate and it makes sense, more density is encouraged. It's encouraged by the comp plan. Comp plan also talks about more dense development where it's feasible, where it makes sense, and that is a big issue these days. It helps relieve pressure on development at the edge of the city where infrastructure isn't there and where it's more costly. Development in an area like this can take advantage of the existing infrastructure that's already been bought and paid for and built. So the planning department is supportive of both these changes and is recommending approval. I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have.
I'll have a question after we hear presentation and testimony. I know that for sure, but I don't have any right now.
Okay, anyone else?
Off the top of your head, Brian, can you tell me when the redevelopment plan was first adopted?
You mean the PUD?
No, the redevelopment plan, or for the development.
The well, yeah, okay. So the development plan is a component of the PUD.
Okay.
Like I said, two components, the site plan, all the plan sheets, all grading and drainage and all that. The companion to it is the development plan. It's the text part of it. Rather than notes on it, you're usually accustomed to seeing, those are pulled out and put in this booklet, which was in your packet, that development plan. That's approved with the PUD. That is part of it. That was in 2004.
Thank you.
Okay. Okay. We would entertain the testimony from the applicant, please.
Good afternoon, members of the Planning Commission. Danae Kalkowski. I'm appearing today on behalf of the applicant, Sacamano Investments. And also with me here today are Brad Marshall and Sam Manzitos Jr., principal of the applicant. And what we're going to do is kind of a team approach. So I'm going to talk a little bit about Village Gardens and the amendment requests. Brad's going to talk a little bit about the design of Village Gardens and the parking trends, and then Sam's going to talk about the neighborhood outreach and site adjustments that have been made as a result of that neighborhood outreach, and then go through the parking numbers with you. So if it's okay with you, I'd have all three of us do our testimony, and then we would all three be available for questions when we're done.
That sounds excellent.
work?
Thank you.
So as Brian was stealing some of my thunder, which he does sometimes, but in mentioning, Village Gardens is a unique development in the city of Lincoln. I don't know, we've been around longer than Brian because our office has had the fortune of being involved in it since the beginning, which is over 20 years ago. So it's the result of foresight and deliberate planning by the Campbell family. It included community conversations, design charrettes, working with national consultants and planners, to envision a master plan that would exemplify a traditional neighborhood development. Then there was work with the city under the form of the PUD, or the Planned Unit Development, approved in 2004, that created then the framework for this traditional neighborhood development and helped make it a viable reality in our community. So the development plan that was approved with the PUD, those kind of look similar to what Brian put up, but I have kind of outlined in red. The top map comes from that development plan, and then the bottom one is just a map to kind of give you a little bit more sense of it. But the development plan was approved along with the PUD, and it contains the development standards for the project. And the language in the very beginning of that development plan recognizes Village Gardens project as unique and different for the city of Lincoln, and identifies specifically that village center, which is the area that's outlined in red, as the development's commercial core, and it specifically states it's a mixed-use zone. It allows for a mix of commercial and high-density residential uses. So the height and the parking amendments requested before you today are, as Brian mentioned, adjustments to that PUD regulating plan. The B3 zone, which is the underlying zone, is typically found in older commercial centers, and it was purposefully chosen for this development due to the traditional mixed-use character that you would typically find in these B3 neighborhood developments. So the village center, in keeping with traditional neighborhood development concept, was intended to create a compact mixed-use development maximizing square footage and density, and this is aided by design elements for the development and cross-parking rights that facilitate the core principles of being able to park and walk to multiple businesses within the commercial center, and then also having residential uses within walking distance of the residential, of the commercial center. The high-density apartments, such as those being proposed by the applicant, have always been part of the master plan for Village Gardens and for the Village Center. Cross-parking rights and on-street parking designed within the Village Center provide opportunities and flexibility for parking within this development that don't necessarily exist in other traditional multifamily developments, where apartments may be a standalone use and all of the parking has to be provided on-site to meet the needs. The applicant's request to reduce the on-site parking ratio to the 1-to-1, which is what's required in the B3 zone, is allowing it to make use of the unique character and qualities of this development. And those are available because we have cross-parking rights, because it is part of a mixed-use center. And we have on-street parking as well as parking lots. The two adjustments, as Brian mentioned, are appropriate for this location, consistent with the underlying B3 zone, and in keeping with the overall goals of the Village Gardens development, particularly the goals of the Village Center, by providing higher density residential uses in the mixed-use environment. The proposed apartments are also compatible with the goals of the comprehensive plan, which staff always does a good job of outlining in the staff report. So those goals include, but aren't limited to, allowing increased density near a commercial center, providing for mixed use within a commercial center, and providing a mix of housing choices that support diverse neighborhoods. Some of these goals aren't necessarily easily met. We talk about increasing density in our urban environment a lot, but sometimes it's hard to accomplish in the suburban areas. However, this is one development that, because of the master planning that happened early on, it was intended to operate as a more traditional commercial center with the cross-parking rights that are available. And so we are able to provide some of that density in a more suburban area because of the master planning. I'm going to turn it over to Brad to talk a little bit, and Sam, and then we'll be back for questions.
Danae, can I get your address, please?
Sure, sorry.
That's okay.
1128 Lincoln Mall, Suite 105.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. Brad Marshall with Olson, 601 P Street, Suite 200. I'm primarily going to focus on a lot of the traffic and some of the parking around the proposed project. So one of the first things I'll touch upon was in 2004, when this project was initiated, Olson had put together a traffic study for the entire development. And I just may point out a couple of things that stood out to me on that. Particularly the closest intersection, which is 56 and Bobley. The report concluded that in a 10-year time range, when the development were to build out, that it would likely meet signal warrants in 2014. We're way beyond that now. I think the development, as you've followed this, has gone a little bit slower than had originally been anticipated in 2004. We are in discussions right now to look at those warrants for that intersection for this project and work with the city, see if those warrants have now been met based off existing and the proposed project. if the existing numbers don't meet those warrants today. So that's the first thing that I wanted to touch upon in the traffic signals. Parking demands. Brian asked a really good question, not knowing really exactly why. Olson has been involved with this project since the beginning as well. I unfortunately have not been there from the start, but in 2004, as you're looking at apartment and apartment mixes, we've seen a progression of change and really in the type of dwelling units that are the primary focus of a lot of these apartment complexes today, especially when you're looking at more in inner city and density. You're seeing more one room and a studio apartment dominate the mix. And so you're not getting as many two-bedroom apartments in these apartment complexes as they're constructed. Olson was in front of Planning Commission for an amendment to Wandering Creek very recently with the very same argument for a reduction of parking from 1.75 to a 1.5 reduction, because their mix was about 65% single and studios and 35% two-bedroom. This proposed project is 70-30, so just even a little bit more than what was there. And I'll point out the difference from that project to this project. That was a standalone lot where they provided all the parking on this project, as opposed to what Danae pointed out with the cross parking agreements for this project, and to benefit with the surrounding units in parking. So even going back all the way to 2004, you'll notice on-street parking and a lot of pedestrian-friendly design elements within the entire development. And I'll just kind of point out, there are existing stalls that are angled. These are design elements that take up more space. They provide people coming in and out of the development that are on the perimeters. You'll see this on this project to the west and to the north, parking on street. And they can pull into spaces, they can pull out of spaces more easily. And this is a huge benefit, not only providing additional parking to adjacent properties, but also from the traffic calming perspective. I've driven through there a lot, frequent a lot of businesses in there, and I can't even remember a time that I've been barreling through at 25 miles per hour, which would be kind of a standard maybe in a commercial center, because you are looking for parking spaces and you are looking for people to pull out. Those also provide additional safety measures for pedestrians. This is supposed to be a walkable, friendly neighborhood and commercial center here. And I'll just kind of point out one of the images from the aerial topography on the city GIS. You'll see here one of the private roadways, and you'll see the angled parking within the development. These design elements of pedestrian crosses, really safe crosses, if you will, that you have islands that are projecting out, getting pedestrians closer to the edge of the street. People are driving along the driveways and they can see those pedestrians faster, as well as it shortens the distance for pedestrians to actually cross. These are elements that are throughout the entire development that will be adjacent to this project as well. So that concludes most of my traffic information here. I'll turn it over to Sam. Thanks, Brad.
Put an image up here. Hi, good afternoon. My name is Sam Manzito Jr. Let me know if this shows up here. The project my partner Kevin James, Brett West, and I are planning to develop in Village Gardens will be a Class A apartment complex with amenities such as underground parking, unique outdoor spaces, a large party room, spacious common lounge areas, a gym with classroom space, and an elaborate pool area. As Brad said, the complex will have approximately 177 units and will be approximately 70% studios or one bedrooms and 30% two bedroom units. This works out to about 230 bedrooms. I'm proud to have been able to work with the Campbell family for so many years on their vision of Village Gardens. Both Kevin and I have a vested interest in its success as we have ownership in some of the buildings and businesses located in Village Gardens, and we are excited about this next project. We believe that not only will our project support the Campbell family vision of Village Gardens, but it'll also serve as a catalyst for growth of existing businesses currently located in Village Gardens and the attraction of new businesses to the area. Since proposing this concept to city planning, we have been met with both support and opposition. The development group has extended a personal letter to the neighbors explaining the project. We also held an open forum meeting on May 6th to discuss the project and listen to the concerns of a group of neighbors, as well as having met individually with several of the businesses in Village Gardens. The main concerns heard through opposition letters and meetings were density, parking, traffic, safety. Listening to the neighbors, we have worked to address those concerns. On the screen here is a site plan of the Village Gardens Commercial District. To accommodate the apartments, the development team has decreased the number of units and has been able to increase the parking on site, addressing both density and parking. With 177 units and 208 parking stalls in this location here, just in green, we have been able to increase our parking ratio from 1 stall per unit to 1.18 stalls per unit on site on the apartment lot. Utilizing the adjacent stalls to the north on Bowlby Lane, these 18, and west on Cross Lake Lane for a total of 52, this increases our total stalls to 260, increasing the parking ratio to 1.47 stalls per unit. And keep in mind, we have 230 bedrooms, so that's more than that number. As a point of reference, the CIP Gateway Apartments at 56 and Cotner has a ratio of 1.35 stalls per unit and no shared parking. It's all condensed on that site. The cross-access easement parking throughout Village Gardens development will allow for more flexibility as to where residents and visitors will be able to park within the development and on site. However, I believe it's important to share that the pedestrian access points to the apartment building are on the west side of the buildings in these locations and then in the center area. There are no access points on the east side of the building nor on the northeast corner. We believe this will encourage residents to park not only within our site, but also first on Cross Lake Lane, taking pressure off of what might be happening in the center area. Based on the feedback from the neighbors and businesses in the area, to further improve the parking and pedestrian traffic in the area, we have added 161 paved parking stalls to the center area. That's what's in light blue. That will be complete this fall with the completion of this building that's under construction right now. There will be a temporary gravel sidewalk installed in this location here to improve pedestrian traffic or accessibility to these stalls and these businesses in this area. A permanent sidewalk will be installed on the north side of this, thank you, on the north side of this green space here to connect these traffic areas. Small landscape steps will be installed here and here to improve traffic in those areas for pedestrians. And lastly, we've observed parking and listened to concerns of the businesses owners in the area, and we've now asked, as we've learned, that some of their employees may be parking in this Hidcote area, to ask them to park in this area and identify these stalls specifically with signage as customer parking only to help improve parking and traffic in that area. And that's all I have today. Thank you. We'd be happy to answer any questions at this time.
Ma'am, can I get your address?
Oh,
please?
yeah, 4400 Lucille. Thank you.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
No, go ahead, ready?
Danae?
Yes.
I'll just at this point, tell you what my major concern is about the project.
Okay.
And then I know we'll have testimony. I can ask Brian questions later, but I want to get it on the table now. So I agree with all of you that this is a very unique and delightful project in Lincoln. It is one of the couple really great mixed-use residential included developments, planned unit developments that we have. So for me, in a development like that, the question isn't so much, can we comply with what the city wants us to do? The question for me is, can we continue to comply with what the development was based on when it was conceived? With all of, as you alluded to, all of the planners and all the designers at the time. So tell me, this is an opinion probably, but tell me the two quote-unquote adjustments that we're talking about, the height and the parking, which I think are significant in a project like this, as it was conceived in 2004. Do they enhance or, in a worst-case scenario, do no harm to what was planned, again, as a delightful kind of environment for people to live, work, and play? Or do they change the mix? Is something going to get changed here in terms of what Village Gardens is and was always supposed to be with these two adjustments that may be out of character, at least, as we read testimony that we've seen with the letters and stuff. That's a big question to me. To me, it's not so much, can we comply with what the city would like to see, or not what they would like to see, but what they will accept. But what about Village Gardens and the concept that we're trying to continue to establish and perpetuate?
Okay. Those are great questions. I mean, really good questions. So I would say we also have the benefit now of looking 20 years down the road, 2004 to now, 2021. And there are a lot of things that have sort of changed conceptually, development-wise on some things. Back in 2004, we weren't really considering apartments with these, we weren't considering a lot of these height waivers with apartments. And my understanding, and Sam can speak to this, is that a lot of the reason for the need for the increased height is that now with building standards, we're talking about higher floors between buildings. And so to get sometimes the same amount of density, we're doing higher buildings. And that would be something new that probably wasn't necessarily in place back in 2001. I don't necessarily see the height being out of character for the development, Dennis, as this was intended to be a compact, dense, development with people who are there and available to walk and provide customers to the businesses that are located within the commercial center. So that's one take on the height, I guess.
Okay,
Yep.
I get that, but again, in 2004, there was a big idea about what Village Gardens was.
Right.
A lot of people have moved or built their homes in Village Gardens, at Village Gardens, not just homes, but businesses, everything, based on that original concept. And the height is an issue because it's a matter of scale. I mean, the scale of the development is affected by this. And so that's what I'm trying to get at is,
Okay.
I guess if I could ask the question, and if it was possible to do this, it's not, but if it was, I'd say all the planners and architects and everybody that was involved in 2004, if you got all those guys together, people together, what would they say about going from the 1.5 down to 1 stall per unit, and then adjusting the height from 40 to 55? Would they say, well, yeah, that's what, we should have done that then, we should have seen that, but it's the thing that concerns me the most. Are we changing a good mix to something that it was never intended to be? Can I just follow up one other thing? I don't want to ramble here too much. You guys are getting bored. But is there an architectural review committee in Village Gardens that looks at, okay, so that, have we gone through that? Have you gone through that process?
And we've started it with.
Okay, because I've been involved with Fallbrook for the last 20 years, and everything goes through a review process there that is really incorporates that residential or the people who live there.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that would be really important here to make sure that it's being consistent with what
Yeah.
they bought into.
Hey, Dennis, can I address a couple of your?
You bet,
comments
yeah,
earlier?
please.
Sure.
I'm searching for answers.
Yeah, you bet. So another thing on the height, we're only going to be about 5 feet taller than the Marriott, which is right next door.
Okay.
And another reason why we've gone to the height that we have is because these will be luxury apartments. So we're going with 9-foot ceilings on most of the levels and 10 foot on the top level. And like Danae suggested, the requirements to go, between the ceiling of one level to the floor of the next have grown just based on how we do our structure and
Okay.
code reasons there. In addition to that, when Village Gardens, I've been a part of Village Gardens for a long time too, and I don't think those initial planners would have expected a gas station on this site or a convenience store. It wasn't on the site. In fact, that was supposed to be a medical office in that location. Where Jet Splash is located at as well, that was not planned on that site. There was actually 3 multi-level buildings on that site that would have been either office or mixed-use buildings there as well. The original site plan in one of the versions 10 to 15 years ago actually had about 300,000 square feet of retail space, retail or office space shown on it, with about the same number of parking stalls that we are showing here. When you add our apartment square footage, which is typically at a lower stall to square foot ratio, we're only at about 350,000 square feet if we develop it the way that this is currently shown on this site plan. So I think the overall demand, if it happens the way we're planning on, will end up being less of an impact on the area as a whole.
Okay, I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Kind of piggybacking off of what the dialogue with Dennis's questions. Again, the overall concern is the reliance of the community in what those standards have been since 2004. More for me than what the underlying zone requirements are. And it sounds like you've made significant adjustments and are hearing those concerns. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but am I hearing that one of the reasons why you're coming to us with this proposed change is that things just are done differently now than what was anticipated in 2004? So that the 1.5, the reason for that at that time looks a little different now because of the 70-30 mix in the apartment buildings. And the same as you pointed out with the difference in building height. Is that accurate? Is that one of the reasons why this makes sense and still fits without changing the character, as Dennis was alluding to?
Yeah, I would agree with that, but I would also say too that we're trying to, we believe the highest and best use for that piece of ground right there is the apartment complex as designed. And so we're trying to maximize the use. I mean, the traditional neighborhood design is a lot of it's about sustainability and making sure that the resources are shared. Mm-hmm. And so we're trying to maximize our use on that property to the best of our abilities.
So that lot, and you showed this a little bit in the end of your presentation, Sam, yep. The lot directly to the north, then part of that's being developed, and then you're at some point soon, then there will be additional parking there that will be not only accessed by this, that will be available for the development as a whole. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And that's directly to the north of the apartment complex?
Yeah, the apartment complex is right here. The north end of it is. All of this parking in the center here will be shared parking. There is currently parking in this yellow. What you see in yellow is current parking, but all the light blue will be added when this building is complete. These purple buildings are proposed buildings that will be, we'll add the red parking once those are complete someday in the future.
And the purple building is under construction currently and will be completed soon?
Right, yeah, the purple, this one's under construction. It looks blue on here. So, the blue buildings are future developments.
Okay.
Follow-up question? Oh,
Mm-hmm.
Go ahead,
No,
Cindy.
go ahead, Dennis.
So, Sam, when you responded to the question about is there a review process, tell me what happens forward from here. I mean, from this point on, in terms of what happens with that review process.
Yeah, Dick Campbell takes the plans and he meets with 2 architects.
Okay.
And they review it together and
Okay.
make comments.
Thanks.
All right, couple questions. You answered one, that the Marriott is actually, what, 45 feet? Is that what you were saying?
Approximately, I don't know the exact.
But what's the height of the tallest of all the commercial buildings in that area right now? Do you know?
It would probably be the Marriott, because it's 3 stories tall. The other building is only 2 stories.
Okay. Can you slide up that picture a little bit to show us the changes in green that you have there?
Yeah.
So what we have in our packet is like a U-shaped apartment building with parking in the middle. And this, I'm just,
Let me explain it.
yeah,
So-
please, thank you.
You enter in off of Cross Lake Lane. This area here is on the same level as the underground parking, and so this outside ring here is underground parking. There's 2 ways in and out of that underground parking. One's right here, and one's right here. There's surface parking in the center area, in this location here, and in this location here. And then we will also be adding, these stalls are not currently in place, but we'll be adding these stalls here along Cross Lake Lane as well. And then we made room, that was part of our adjustments, we made room for an additional 8 stalls on the side of the Marriott that will be parallel parking stalls in that location.
So point out to Cindy where the building is, Sam, because
Yeah.
because we're showing the parking and it's underground, you can't see where the building is.
Sorry.
That's all right.
So
Very
the-
good.
So the building is this footprint here, here, it goes around here,
So it is kind of a U-shaped.
Yeah,
that location.
all right. Let's see. So the changes you discussed that have already been made, like the additional parking, when were those changes put into place?
Those changes were made after the neighborhood meeting.
So after the May 6th meeting?
Yep.
Um,
And then I had some meetings with some of the neighbors, the businesses too.
Okay, so 177 units. How many, just to make sure I have it right, and I understand it's 230 bedrooms, but it's 177 units. How many parking spots are green? Or maybe green and then those,
There's 125 that are underground and 83 that are on the surface there.
yeah, especially because when you said that these were luxury apartments, and I'm imagining that if somebody is in a luxury 1-bedroom with 10-foot ceilings and it's a couple, chances are there's probably 2 cars. These are probably not college students who are dealing with their 1 car. So, okay, that's really helpful. I appreciate that. It's good detail. Thanks.
Yep.
Okay. Any other questions? We're good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we will now take testimony in support. So come on up. Anybody coming up to talk about in support? Anybody on Zoom in support?
I don't believe so.
Okay. And when is there to answer questions if needed? Okay, perfect.
Well, those were in some other items, but yeah, okay.
Okay. And so now let's entertain the testimony in opposition.
Thank you.
Mike Brown. I live at 5903 Minter Lane, and I'm currently the president of the Village Gardens HOA.
Could I get your address, please?
5903 Minter Lane.
Thank you.
I'd like to respectively request 25 minutes. We have 4 presenters, if that's possible.
Everyone okay with that? Okay?
Yes.
Okay.
We've provided you with hard copies of our presentation, and then condense the meeting that we held in the neighborhood onto that presentation. So as duly elected representatives of the Village Gardens, if I can run this computer, Village Gardens HOA, it is a position of the Village Gardens HOA that we adamantly oppose to the waiver request of the PUD development plan for height restrictions from 40 foot to 55 foot, and a waiver of the parking ratio requiring 1.5 to 1 parking stalls to 1.1 1-to-1 parking stalls per unit. There'll be other objections offered that include the aesthetics and the historical vision and quality of the Village Garden neighborhood and what it was originally envisioned to be. As the HOA, we've met and we've come up with reasons why we're opposed to this amendment or the waiver to the development plan. Again, we're opposed to the height restrictions. The aesthetics do not adhere to the Village Garden style or historical vision of the development in its infancy, where residents built or purchased their homes or lots. Again, the parking waiver, we're opposed to that. It's already extremely stressed in that area. It will further be stressed when Mindy's Nails is complete, which is the purple building I think that Mr. Manzito showed. And if additional business lots are built around the outside edge of it, that will also increase the parking pressure. And we do have some slides that will show that. Mr. Manzito, the developer, gave us some comps on similar projects that were included some inaccurate parking ratios, and they were not really comparables because they're not directly next to any busy commercial areas. Getting ahead of myself here. The project would also almost double the number of units in an approximate 3-acre space compared to what currently exists in all of Village Gardens in the residential area. We feel like the project was rushed and it attempted to be pushed through without working in good faith with the neighborhood and businesses and the HOA. We happened to catch it from some notices you folks sent out and started protesting it, which we appreciate you taking it off the consent agenda early on. The potential customers in the marketplace are already starting to complain about not being able to patronize the businesses due to the lack of parking. And that's happens most every night and during the day, and we will show you some pictures of those later on in the presentation. Now, a multifamily unit would be welcomed by the Village Gardens HOA. We're not opposed to that. We are opposed to this particular project. It just doesn't fit the neighborhood, and the scope of what we feel as residents the neighborhood is all about. So taking all the opposition that we've received from our residents, we initiated some action items. We did meet with the developer at his office to review the project. After that meeting, we did hold a neighborhood meeting with the developer, which drew over 50 residents, all expressing concerns about the project. After that, the developer did present a counter proposal, remove 4 units from the original proposal down to 177 units. With the amount of opposition that we had, we felt we needed to get a petition out, so we did launch that petition, and it was signed by over 540 people. We've connected with the neighborhood nearby HOAs, and they also are objecting to this proposal. The Planning Commission, the letters in oppositions far outnumber the letters of support for this proposal. And several businesses in the marketplace, including Jet Splash, which I'll show you that, Sirha's Place, the convenience store, Residence Inn by Marriott, Art and Soul, Pharmacy Solutions, Ivy Lane Salon, are objecting to the project just because of the lack of parking and the height. They don't like the heights of it, so they're already having a hard time with the their customers finding places to park. These are some of those objections that came right from the business owners. You'll see one from Art and Soul, one from Jet Splash, one from PDD LLC, and also from Pharmacy Solutions. Also, this is the letter in opposition from Thompson Creek HOA, and also Trinity Methodist Church, which has an agreement with the Development Corporation on, and it would be one of those handouts that we gave you, that the Development Corporation has guaranteed them some parking in the marketplace. So the comps that the developer sent us, apologize for this, it's a little hard to read. So we took what they sent us, and I put it on a different sheet here so you'll be able to see it a little better. They gave us the Cotner and P. They said there was 153 units and 200 stalls, which is a 1.36. We contacted the architect that was responsible for that project. There's actually 153 units and 215 stalls. That also is just a block up from O Street, and there's really no surrounding residential around it. It sits there by itself. The other one was an 84 flats. There's 204 and 276 stalls given to us by the applicant. The architect told us there was 204 units, 420 stalls, or 2.06 ratio. And those are all self-contained. There's no commercial nearby. East Lake Flats, the applicant told us there was 220 units, 301 stalls, a 1.36 ratio. The architect told us there was 475 units and 852 stalls, a 1.8 ratio. That would be after phase 2 is complete of that East Lake. Again, that's located out behind Walmart, Menards, and there's really no cross parking comparison out there. The other one that they gave us is Center Line in Omaha. We're not that familiar with that, so we didn't really look at that much. This is a picture of the parking. I think you saw that earlier. It's kind of a busy picture. I'd like to kind of walk you through it if I could. We'll go by colors. So the red lines that are just the long lines that you see on there, those are actually going to ADA spaces. So, and there are other additional ADA spaces within the parking there. Those can't really be counted towards parking spaces available. The purple squares, you'll see this, it's the Residence Inn. They use all surface parking, and right now in the peak season, they will overflow into the residential area because there isn't adequate parking there for them either. The yellow, that indicates existing parking. As a note, if you go clear up to the upper left, you'll see the Campbell's Nursery. That parking is only available when they're open. Otherwise, it has a closed so it can't be considered as public parking. It is only available when they're open for their customers. The blue square that you see at the top of the map, that's approximately 750 to 1,000 feet, from the proposed apartment complex. I guess I wouldn't want to walk 1,000 foot down to my apartment at minus 30 and 20 mile an hour winds in the wintertime. So I don't think we can really consider that parking for the apartment complex. The pink squares that you see there, those are private parking. Those are actually owned by the property owners and not available for public parking. They're only for their customers only. If you look at where you see the arrows, that's a traffic flow in and out of Hero 88 and Catalyst. It's pretty congested during peak times. Again, probably not conducive to parking for the apartment. The little yellow dots you see around the inside of that, that is the cones that the owner of the convenience stores had to put up there to keep people from parking in his right, blocking his gas islands. They can't even get in because of parking. People were congested with it. The red does indicate future parking, and the blue, again, as Sam said, is proposed for 2021. While it appears that there may be adequate parking, there are still business pads that will be built around, and they will obviously require more parking, so they will also take care of most of that parking. This is a map that we put together that shows you the actual distances from the center of the proposed project out to different areas that they are maintaining, they can use as parking. As you can see, the parking into the residential area is actually closer than some of the other parking that they're proposing to use. You can go to the south, and in that parking there where Art FX is, and those areas is actually closer than most of the parking that they're trying to approve for cross parking. I've got just a few pictures here. I won't go labor them over, but these are some examples of our pictures. This was taken on Friday the 30th at 1:15. You can see the area already has quite a few people parking in there in the middle of the afternoon. Here's one this also shows where Campbell's have closed the parking up that I showed you on the original map up in the corner. There's also parking aerial shots where you can see the parking now already full. Another one on 4:30 at 1:15 from a different angle with the parking that's filled up. Another one then on 4:30 at 6 o'clock in the evening. And as you can see people are parking on the grass. They're parking wherever they can get in and get their car someplace to park in order to patronize the businesses. This one's on 5:20 at 5:30 in the evening. Again, you can see them parking in the gravel, you can see them parking on the grass, and all the parking spots are completely full. I'll turn it over to Steve Clymer at this point.
Good afternoon, Steve Clymer. I live at 6032 Chartwell Lane, and I'm a retired architect. I am speaking on behalf of the Board of Directors for Village Garden as well as the neighborhood in general. Our response today is to voice our opposition to the applicant's request to decrease the parking ratios and to increase the allowable building height of any portion of this PUD from 40 feet to 55 feet. We understand that the zoning language defines height as measured from the midpoint of grade levels on a building elevation to the midpoint of the gabled roof elevation. We are very concerned of the physical and aesthetic impact to Village Garden Marketplace and to the surrounding residential neighborhoods if these relaxations were approved. You'll see the slide here. In 2003, Village Gardens was the first PUD to be approved under the city's then new planned unit development ordinance. This slide is a reflection back to an early 2005 concept of the vision. Note that it is a neighborhood with small architecture, English flair, but no large structures. The PUD's Village Gardens architectural standards state the following. Lincoln's historic neighborhoods are the standard used for new construction, streets, and boulevards in terms of height, scale, setback and rhythm, relationship of materials, texture, details and color, roof shape, orientation, proportion, and rhythm of openings. Materials should be similar in scale and texture to those used traditionally, while the employment of new and creative interpretations of details is encouraged. Okay, the project is underway. It is an envious neighborhood to live in. There is excitement. February 26th of 2012, a Lincoln Journal-Star article quoted Dick Campbell regarding the village. It is a place where everything is designed around the ease of walking or biking to the store, church, the doctor's office, or a neighbor's home. A place with a wide variety of architectural styles, representing the city's older and cherished homes along Professor Row, Piedmont, Near South, Woods Park, and Country Club areas. Old home character without old house problems. February 24th of 2018, Dick Campbell enthusiastically shared in a Lincoln Journal-Star article that within the next couple of years, visitors to the neighborhood will feel as if they were in a small English country village with a modern twist. As it continues to develop, it will be much like the Cotswolds in England. This style is sometimes called the storybook style. And to the credit of the Campbells and new Village Garden property owners, it is getting there. To date, a very successful development of homes, offices, shops, live-work units, church, and a hotel have been built that reflect the concept design mantra. Our HOA welcomes apartment dwellers and the diversity that it brings, but we want apartment buildings or any other use to reflect appropriate height, scale, rhythm, continuity of materials, all mentioned in the Village Garden standards. Let's look at a few of the success stories that are truly reflective of the visions and the standards. The back garden of Scooters, the Pharmacy Solutions, the new Gary Michaels store. These all are reflective of the Cotswold design, feeling. They're 1 and 2 stories. A lot of diversity in materials. This is further showing materials, a mixture of materials. The Residence Inn, a 3-story building, but it fits into the vision very well with its mixture of stone and roof gables. It's a nice corner point of the village. Next slide. This is showing the Main Street down past Scooters and drive up. Can't see that over here. But again, this is very reflective of small village look. Even the convenience store has done an excellent job of falling into the Cotswold style and the scale, the rhythm, the dormers, the stucco and the battens. As we get into the neighborhood, which is, why we're living there, the Trinity Methodist Church, that was a use that was put into this. Fits into the neighborhood very well, and again, is a Cotswold scale and style. These are just some slides of some of the various different houses and apartments that are in the development. Okay. Who wouldn't enjoy living close or in this development? Considering the request for relaxation of parking limits and height increases, our HOA does not consider that the proposed apartment building is a continuation of the original vision and of the vision that we literally bought into. This slide, today specifically, I'm speaking to that of height and scale. We are concerned that the proposed building is designed with one leg of it running parallel to Bobley Lane, and with a building length close to that of a city block is visually too long, especially when combined with the existing hotel being about 3/4 of a block long. Though we dislike this 2-block long, almost continuous wall, the current PUD language would allow that. Okay. This sketch of the hotel combined with the submitted north elevation of the apartment building illustrates what the north elevation of the 5-story apartment building with a hotel property would schematically project to the village below. The Residence Inn exists as a 3-story building. Adding another building that is a continuation of that 3 stories has to be accepted by us as the existing PUD language allows it. But we cannot support a request to take the PUD's height restriction from 45 foot to 55 foot, a 5-story building per the apartment elevations. This is completely out of scale and context with all the other buildings in Village Gardens. This is not the Haymarket where a 5-story apartment complex in this scale would fit in. This 55-foot height allows a building with a north facade that starts with 4 stories out of the ground on the east end and continues to 5 stories out of the ground on the west end. In addition, the center courtyard of the 3 legs with a pool and parking would have somewhere around 580 foot, again, close to 2 city blocks of length of continuous exposed 5 stories out of the ground. This development has been very successful. We credit the Campbells to not straying from the original dream, but in the last phases of finishing the development, this apartment project does not complement the dream. And we appeal to you, the Planning Commission, to retain the maximum allowable building height at 40 foot.
I think Bill is going to join us by Zoom.
Is Zoom. Okay, excellent, thank you. Okay, Bill, can you hear us?
Bill, go ahead and unmute yourself.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, if you could give us your name and address, please.
Okay, thank you. Good afternoon. My name's William Swisher of 7039 Fernhill Place here in Lincoln. I'm here to offer testimony against the proposed change of zone involving Village Gardens. My wife and I have been residents of Village Gardens for 9 years, and during that time have loved the neighborhood's unique look and feel. I've also been involved with the Village Gardens Homeowners Association and served 3 years as its first president following the transfer of governance of the HOA from the Campbell family to the homeowners in 2018. What initially attracted us to Village Gardens grew directly out of the Campbell family's initial concept for the neighborhood. The slogan was the art of traditional living. This translated into an interesting but regulated mix of building styles, housing types, and land uses, which encouraged a mingling of ages and incomes and promoted community interaction. It also had a walkable commercial node, which again offered inviting and interesting architecture and approachable facades. The result has been a mostly successful blend of traditional small town and more contemporary urban feel that's engaging and exciting, but it also has a sense of grace. The neighborhood works because of the thought and care that went into the original PUD. I'm greatly concerned with any change in the PUD at this stage, and especially with the current proposed project. The developer is asking for a height variance from 40 to 55 feet, creating a complex of significant density and constructing a building very much out of proportion to surrounding structures and out of proportion to the entire neighborhood. The number of living units proposed is more than currently exists in the entire Village Gardens neighborhood. This is an aesthetic, but even more a functional problem. Cramming a very large number of living units in a small space, worsening vehicle congestion in an already congested area. The popular restaurants and bars in the marketplace already suffer from limited parking. Current plans are to construct at least 3 additional commercial establishments in the immediate area of the proposed apartment complex, which will further increase demand, yet remove even more parking spaces currently present. If injecting a large number of new residents into an already congested neighborhood isn't enough, the developers propose to revise the PUD guidelines again and decrease provided parking for the apartments from 1.5 to 1 space per living unit. Furthermore, although the original PUD required the parking provided to be on site, unlike the live-work units, which could utilize a shared or cross parking arrangement, The developers propose to extend this cross-parking arrangement to the apartments. This would be, I believe, a huge problem, one that the original PUD wisely tried to avoid with its provision of 1.5 on-site slots per living unit for type G or multifamily apartment structures. We who live in Village Gardens are not opposed to the idea of a properly sized multifamily apartment being built on the proposed site. I actually think a significantly smaller development could be an asset to the neighborhood's residents and its businesses. A smaller structure could include adequate on-site parking and not be a visual blight. It would provide needed housing, but with a style and feel consistent with the neighborhood's original concept, as promoted to those of us who chose to make this our home. The current proposal benefits only the developer's bottom line, and I and the rest of the Village Gardens neighborhood urge you to maintain the provisions of our current PUD and deny the requested variances to the height restriction and parking requirements. Thank you for your time, and thank you hopefully for your help in this matter.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, members of the Planning Commission. My name is Peter Catt, 633 Apples Way, Suite 115, Lincoln, Nebraska, 68516. I have the great privilege to be able to represent this homeowners association today. They called me up and asked for a little help. I don't know that I can do much for them. They were pretty impressive as we prepared for this because they poured out their heart and feelings about why they love their neighborhood and what makes it special to them. They're significantly invested in it. 2 weeks ago when I was here, it's good to see everybody's face, by the way. It's nice to see eyes again. I love being out in the world.
Okay.
Not ready. When you're ready, it's okay. I'm not being critical at all. The meddling people showed up. And being primarily a development attorney, it always amazes me when neighbors come in and protect something that really isn't theirs, but they own it. Those people came in and protected their center. These people are protecting their market center. Why? Because it's an important, integral part of their neighborhood. I've had the fortune to be able to drive over there a few times and try to go to dinner. The parking impacts are real as they exist today. It's a very nice area. And the challenge is, I understand the applicant's change that's happening in the apartment development world. That's all true. But this is not an urban area. As much as people that feel like it is, it's still on the edge. The amenities for transportation connections are not there. The ability for cross-parking is dramatically changed these days because of people using their homes and occupying them. The COVID change, I think, has changed the world in terms of cross-parking. So when they talk about cross-parking, apartments and dwelling units don't cross-park very well. I want to make, the real point that the neighborhood want to make was really kind of the legal things and the policy implications, I think, beyond just this project. So there's been much made of the B3 requirements. You can put that up. The parking matrix on B3 does say 1 parking stall per dwelling unit, but it also requires it to be within 300 feet. So I think it's a little disingenuous to start talking about parking stalls that are beyond 300 feet as being able to meet the need. In terms of 230 beds, my rough count is not all the single bedroom and studios are going to have 1 person in them. They're going to have guests. My best guess is there's probably at least 345 parking stalls needed to service that. Ballpark would be my guess. I doubt that the applicant wants to limit their tenants to only having 177 cars. So those people have to find a place to go. The other part, this is a pretty big policy change for the city to go down to 1 and say, well, we're going to park them wherever they go. And I can see having this argument continue to go through to other parts and areas in the community. If one per dwelling unit is appropriate in Village Gardens, why not the entire community? This was a well-thought-out plan. I think the applicant's attorney indicated it's a unique development. It is. We need to keep it that way. And the neighbors need your support to not approve these requested amendments to the current plan. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we need to do more Zoom people, or is there anybody in person? Do in person first? Okay, excellent. Thank you. Please coming up.
Hi, my name is Linda White. I am with Pharmacy Solutions, 5750 Headcoat Lane. I'm actually the owner, part owner of the building. I can't impress upon you enough how I fell in love with the development 8 years ago when we built that. We worked with Dick, we worked with Sam Jr. We saw the vision. I still believe in the vision. But today, the way it's presented, we are in complete opposition of the residential. I don't want to repeat everything that was just said behind me because I'm in complete agreement, but some of the hot points that were said, pedestrian friendly. We have an established review committee. We do not have an established review committee. It's Dick. A walking community. Extremely stressed parking. They showed us pictures of that. We're smart people. We can figure this out. There's ways to figure solutions for those hot points. And as a business owner and as a building owner in the Village Gardens, I'm in support of making that development happen, but opposed to the current building. I also saw that when this first came out, I had a refusal letter or an opposition letter from Zipline and Hero 88 that those didn't get loaded. So if those are needed, I'm more than welcome to provide those.
I'll take those if I don't recall receiving those. Thank you.
Thank you.
I have a question.
Yes.
So you're a commercial, you're in the commercial area. With regard to some of the changes that were brought in front of us by the applicant a little earlier in the hearing, do any of those proposed changes with regard to the enhanced parking and the enhanced walkability in those various areas, does that change your perspective or opinion
It
at
really
all?
doesn't, for the fact that you have those 4 blue spots that are still to be developed. So we're adding extra spots, but that's just to help with the congestion as it is today. But if those other 4, I believe it's 4 spots that need to be built out, let's say that's another doctor's office or a mini grocery store or whatever it is, now we really don't have any parking and now we're stuck because we have this apartment building here leaching over into our cross parking. So there's got to be a better solution. I think somebody will get on, but just with the employees alone, I think they showed a picture from 1:30 in the afternoon. With all the employees that work there in all those businesses, almost all those spots are taken anyways. So, any other questions?
Anything else? Okay, thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Michaela Bowling. I live at 6077 Chartwell Lane. I'm a resident of Village Gardens, and I don't want to repeat what was said, but I do want to touch upon a couple things that were all politely described as misleading in the applicant's petition today. They said that they sent out a letter before the consent hearing in May. That's just not true. The residents didn't get a letter. At the neighborhood meeting that we had, Mr. Manzito, when confronted by the lack of a letter, said, well, we sent a letter to all those within 200 feet of the development. I can tell you that the places that are within 200 feet are the hotel and empty development lots, not residents. We found out about the proposal just a couple days before the consent hearing was to take place, and immediately flooded your comment section with oppositions, at which point it was deferred and they set up a community meeting. At that community meeting, They made it abundantly clear that the reason that they are asking for an increase in the number of units, or asking an increase in the height requirement, is not to increase ceiling heights, as they said. But if you read the own letter from Seacrest and Kalkowski and the staff report, it's to increase the number of units, to add another level, not to increase height requirements. And when asked why they needed to increase height requirements to add more units, after some hemming and hawing, it was admitted that it was to get a profitable return, not to help with housing units and density in Lincoln. And then they tell you that they made responses or had a meeting and made changes in response to the neighborhood opposition. They took away 4 units out of 181. That is hardly a responsible response. It's basically to tell you we've made changes, but that's so minimal. And as you've been pointed out, the parking is already stressed, and this is just going to increase it even more. I would say that I hope that you all have read in earnest the letters in support and in opposition to this project. When I last checked at 12:30 today, there were approximately 55 letters in opposition and 13 in support. I would note that all 13 in support came after the deferral hearing on May 6th, or after it was deferred on May 6th. And if you truly read them, one of the 13 is not even in support of the project. It's what I would best describe as a character reference for the Manzitos as people. 2 of the letters in support, one is a Manzito affiliate, another is her husband. And then out of the remaining ones, the majority of them contain the same 3 sentences. So I would suggest that a letter was sent out, should garner support, and it was copy and pasted, as opposed to the number of residents who have more than expressed themselves and their concern, along with the 540 on the online petition. My husband and I are not at all opposed to a apartment complex, as the HOA has already said that they are not opposed. What we are opposed to is the increase in the number of units, along with the reduction in parking. Either one of those is problematic. To do both is just a disaster waiting to happen. We bought into this neighborhood, along with our 2 boys, because of the walkability, because of the convenience, because of the uniqueness of the area. And it's been noted by Commissioner Ryman Yost and Commissioner Scheer, the words traditional, luxury, unique, all of those things are true. So please make them stick to their own PUD draft that they themselves submitted 20 years ago, 15, 20 years ago. Their requirements are just not what we bought into, and it's going to be a problem not only for the current residents and the current businesses, but for the soon-to-be residents of those apartments. If you do not provide them enough parking,
1 minute.
it's going to be a detriment to them as well. And as Commissioner Ryman Yost said, these are luxury apartments. She has a hard time, and I do too, believing that they are going to be limited to 1 car only. They're going to have 2 and probably even 3 cars because they're studio to 3-bedroom apartments. It's just not common sense to think that they're only going to have 1 car, and not to mention that the guests they have. They're going to be parking on nights and weekends, and that's when their guests are going to be coming. That is exactly the time when the parking congestion is at its worst. Mr. Manzito, at our meeting and earlier today, said it originally could have been a much larger business structure, and then kind of suggests that the apartments are a better alternative. I would suggest that's not true. A business development would have required parking during the day, which, while stressful, would not have been exacerbating an already awful problem at night, when at the exact same time as when the residents are going to need parking themselves of those apartments. Parking and for them and their guests on their weekends and nights are the problem. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. More people in opposition? Or we'll move to our Zoom calls. Okay, we'll go ahead and move to the Zoom.
We have Ty right up.
Hi, Ty, can you hear us?
Ty, you need to unmute.
When you're unmuted, go ahead and give us your name and address, and we'll get into it.
We will move on to Gailene Steinbach.
Okay? Gailene, if you'd like to give us your name, full name and address, and go ahead and start talking.
My name is Gailene Steinbach. I own Lulubi Chocolates here in Village Market, in the marketplace. The address is 5720 Hidcote Drive, 68516. I am a business owner, and I cannot stress how much support I have for the speakers that have spoken in opposition to this project. They have all spoken from their heart and definitely have addressed needs that I myself find very, very important. I am speaking in opposition to this change. And I am going to look at it from the standpoint of my business, as well as the employees that share this market space. The marketplace really cannot absorb the increased population demand that is being requested from the developers. In talking about our current situation, I wish I had a map up there for you all. So let me just try and walk you through some of this. This is based on conversations that I have had with business owners and or employees of those businesses. Currently, the new construction that is being built across from the hotel, they foresee having at one time 30 employees working at once. They are a nail salon, so that, of course, their customers, you're going to have 30 customers with that as well. The next, okay, so that's Mindy's Nails. They've got 30 employees that are coming from there. I know from my business and the businesses that share this building, 6 employees need parking from this area. Going back to Hero and Local, they are anticipating, after the expansion of their outdoor seating, which will increase their seating capacity by another 120 seats, they are foreseeing that in order to staff both of those businesses during their peak times, at one time, they will need 50 employees. The building that is where Art and Soul is, at their peak time, at one time, they will need 12 employees. Campbell's, at one time, will need 30 parking spots for their employees. Going down to Pharmacy Solutions, which is the next building I have on here, their requirements for their employees are 17 spots. I haven't, and those are just the people that I have spoken to, up along the edge of Cantwell Avenue. Even though they are not considered part of the marketplace, there are businesses that are established along there. One that is already in existence is 402 Creamery, and their employees also use the same shared parking space. They're already planning to have another business. The businesses are going to be on the tail ends of these shared units. So another business will be going in there. All along that space, there will be the same multi-use buildings where there will be shared residential and shared businesses. All of those businesses will have employees that will need a place to park. So if I were to add up just the parking requirements that are needed currently from employees of the marketplace, I come to 151. That is just the employees and just the ones that I know That's not even taking into consideration any future growth. So the buildings that I think they were listed in blue, the future buildings, I think it's going to be a hard sell to a business to say, come and build here. We have enough parking for either your employees or your customers, but not both.
1 minute.
I have not even talked about the customers. I can tell you right now that when a customer comes, if they see that there is no place for them to park, they are going to find their services elsewhere. This is not a win-win for this business. It is not a win-win for any of these businesses. And it definitely will change the whole dynamic of this neighborhood, which is what we all love. We love the uniqueness of this neighborhood, and expanding another floor so that we can increase is just not a viable. One quick thing I want to say is please ask yourself, who benefits from adding a second floor to this apartment, and who benefits from removing parking stalls? It's not the businesses, and it's not the employees. The people that are going to be affected are the businesses, are the employees, and definitely the neighborhood, because there will be spillover.
Time.
Thank you.
Okay, 2 seconds. Let's make sure we don't have any questions here. Any questions? I do have one question for you. Do you happen to know the hours of the businesses that are in the development?
I do not know the hours. I know of mine. I am here from 8 until 6, but we have some fantastic restaurants that are behind us that are, their hours are much longer into the night as mine, and then as well as Zipline. And you know, we have, there's a happening nightlife here too, but definitely the parking is needed. It's hard to imagine having cross parking spaces and using this area to help overfill to fill the residential.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Okay. Okay, so we do have a few more people listed here, Steve.
Yeah, we, up next, we have Stephen Rickenbach.
Okay.
Am I unmuted?
Yes, you are.
Okay, great. Let me just make things smaller so I can see what I'm going to read here. My name is Stephen Reichenbach, and my address is 6049 Chartwell Lane in Village Gardens. So I, like the other speakers in opposition, support the addition of multifamily dwellings on this parcel. But I oppose the changes to the public use document, the PUD, especially the decrease for the required parking to one parking stall per family dwelling. And I know that they're called family dwellings. My wife and I previously submitted a brief opposition statement, but here I provide testimony against the proposal. The first point I'd like to make is that to so drastically change the PUD would betray Village Gardens residents who purchased their homes under the current PUD. You've heard a lot about that. Residents purchased their homes understanding that there would be a maximum height of 40 feet and a minimum ratio of 1.5 parking stalls per dwelling. To drastically change those limits, increasing the height limit by 37.5% and decreasing the parking ratio by 33.33%, would dramatically change the character of the development in which residents such as myself and my wife have invested. And I'd like to note that 55 feet, as the other speakers have pointed out, that's not really indicative of the real height. The real ground height on the western side to the peak of the roof will be 62 or 63 feet. So it's a very, very tall structure for residential area. The ratio of 1.0 parking stalls per family dwelling is unprecedented for suburban Lincoln. I thought when I met with Manzitos and when I went to the meeting that if I could see an example of such a low parking ratio in suburban Lincoln, that if I could go and see how it worked, that I might be convinced that it would work well enough in my neighborhood. So I asked the developer and the planning department for examples of existing developments in suburban Lincoln with similar density and parking ratios. The developer noted 2 such existing developments, 84 Flats, which has a parking ratio of 1.8, and East Lake Flats, which has a parking ratio of 1.6, both of them above the 1.5 in the current PUD. The developer noted another project, the Cotner and P, which is not yet completed, and so cannot be observed in operation. But that will have a ratio of 1.4 stalls per dwelling, almost the same as the 1.5 in the current PUD. The planning department noted 1 such completed development, the Square at 48, which has a parking ratio of 1.7, 183 units for 183 parking stalls for 109 units. That's the same number of parking stalls as proposed for this project, which has 60% more units. Moreover, the Square at 48 is adjacent to UNL's East Campus and on a very busy intersection, which would accommodate student residents without automobiles. Apparently, there is no existing development in suburban Lincoln with anywhere near such a low parking ratio. The density of 70 family dwelling units per acre for the proposed development also is unprecedented for suburban Lincoln. The total acreage for this parcel is 3.39 acres, but about 0.8 acres provides off-street parking for the residents in hotel. So the actual density is 177, or originally 181, dwellings per about a little over 2.5 acres. For comparison, the densest residential zoning type in the city is R7, is for 15 dwellings per acre. This is nearly 5 times denser. I asked for the developer and the planning department for development that with similar density and parking ratios, and the 84 Flat has a density of less than 23 compared to 70 for this development. And East Lake Flat, the density is about 20. So again, that's less than a third of what the density for this is. The planning department noted 1 such completed development, the Square at 48, but its density still is about half of the density of this development, and it's on a highly commercialized arterial 48th Street, and so there's just really no existing development in suburban Lincoln anywhere near such density. Although there are benefits, as the planning department noted, there are true benefits of residential density. It's important to provide adequate infrastructure, such as parking and transportation, and to have consistency with the character of the local community. The applicant's proposed site plan was modified to include a little more parking along the back, and they've included that in the plan that they presented to you. But those 8 units that they added there is in the lot that provides parking for the hotel. Now, I'd like to point out that the Residence Inn has 91 units. Currently, the hotel meets the required number of parking stalls only with parking along Bobley Lane. So, street parking for the hotel. This has created a situation in which hotel patrons park across the street and must navigate luggage and children across the street, which is dangerous. Moreover, the traffic-heavy spa and live-work properties are being developed immediately across Bobley Lane from the hotel. Those will increase the demand for on-street parking, and so it'll take away parking that's currently used by the hotel. Even the amended plan does not provide the number of parking stalls in that lot for the hotel that is required by code. By code, they must have 1 parking stall per hotel room, plus 1 parking stall per 2 employees of the hotel, and this plan will not meet that. And so this whole idea that shared parking, can make up for all the insufficiencies that exist, it's just not going to work. I'd like to talk a little bit about the presentations that were made earlier. And the developers talked about the newer urbanism and the intentionality and vision and foresight and deliberation that went into planning. And we agree with all those things. That's why we invested in this neighborhood. But what they're planning is not that plan. It's not the plan that had intentionality, vision, and foresight that they talked about in 2004. Otherwise, we wouldn't have had a meeting where 50 people came out in the evening to oppose this, the petition with so many signatures against it. And I'd like to thank Commissioner Scheer for bringing up this issue of this isn't what we invested in when we bought into this into this unit. One thing that I think that hasn't been said enough.
Stephen, we need to have you wrap up. You've hit your 5 minutes, please.
Can I have one more minute?
1 more minute. Wrap it up for us, please. Thank you.
Okay, so the church parking, the church it has an agreement that will give them parking in this shared area, but that wasn't included in the descriptions or plans presented by the developer. And moreover, the church has plans to add a sanctuary, which will make even more demands on parking, not just on Sundays, but for funerals and other events. They talked a lot about the B3 requirement for parking being only 1 stall per dwelling unit, but there are other restrictions on dwellings in B3 that have been waived in the PUD, and so that brings me pretty much to a close. I would like to say one more thing. I don't believe there is an effective architectural committee for the village center. Sam mentioned that there were Sam and Dick are great people. Dick's the neighbor. Sam built our house, but the architectural committee, I believe, is not working. There is no effective in that area. No effective architectural committee.
Thank you so much. Okay. We have more Zoom people. Okay.
That is the end of the Zoom. The folks still logged on.
Okay. Thank you. Okay. Are there any other testimony in opposition before we move on? Okay, we'll go ahead and move to staff questions. Okay. Where do we want to start?
I have one.
Okay.
So the applicant brought up cross-parking and public parking agreements and rights. Does that fit in with the B3 zoning, or is that a relation to the PUD?
It's in relationship to this PUD. I mean, you look at a lot of the older districts around the city, like U9, Havelock, and College View, B3 zoning. Whatever that parking requirement is, you need to provide that on your property. Other private property owners along College View, you don't share parking with each other. But here, it's part of this overall development. Their concept was this notion of shared parking throughout. There were going to be some areas that were just parking lots for that purpose.
So is that specific to a certain area, or as other construction, like commercial, buildings were constructed?
You mean the extent of who shares in that shared parking?
Right.
I can't tell you that. That would have to be Village Gardens to tell you who all those parties are. I believe it's probably primarily that area that we showed that's designated as the village center, where most of the businesses are, commercial uses are.
Thank you.
Okay.
Along those lines, just piggybacking off of Lorenzo's question, there was specific mention, and we received information about the church parking agreement. Was that part of the discussion, or was that part of what you looked at when you were
No.
envisioning the parking issues in this area?
No, I think in some ways, Our view of it was simpler than that.
Okay,
Lincoln Municipal Code, the requirement is 1 stall per unit.
sure.
How do we analyze it? How do we look at it to argue that it should be something more than that? Well, that's what you've heard today. We did not do that.
Understood. Thank you.
Okay.
So that, one more question along this line. As a planning commissioner, we have the issue of what is supported by or acceptable to the city on these adjustments. Can you lend a little bit of light on this for me as a planning commissioner and how I might think about this in terms of a vote? How much of this is internal village development issues versus city stuff? I mean, I know they're related, but it sounds like there's a lot of internal things that are also at play here within a development. Is that unfair? Just don't go there if it's unfair.
It is a big, I mean, that's a big question.
I know.
Okay. I mean, and somebody mentioned city policy, right? What I can tell you is that as we're looking at an update of the comprehensive plan, we're looking at those issues of higher density, reduced parking, because there are a lot of developments, okay, there are some developments within the city that they built more parking than they need. And we have seen this trend in a change in apartments, how they're being built, who's living there, and the parking demand that they generate. So based on those things, that's how we came up with the recommendation that we have got here. Our code is talking about 1 space per dwelling unit. We're having that broader discussion now of less parking. And at this point, I think the planning director is going to add.
Sorry to ask that question, David, but I thought it was appropriate.
David Carey with the Planning Department, 555 South 10th Street. I'll answer that question just so that it's clear for everybody. Our recommendation for this project in the staff report stands based on what Brian was talking about, which is we have existing regulations, we have an existing comprehensive plan, that based on those pieces of information, our recommendation of conditional approval based on what's in the report can stand on its own. What you're hearing is that there certainly is a lot of other things to consider if you're a member of the Village Garden neighborhood, of that commercial district, certainly. But within what is already on the books for the PUD and the fact that we have the PUD mechanism to work with, what is recommended in the staff report is valid and is what the staff is standing by. That does not necessarily mean that that is the only consideration in play here. But we would say that the staff report stands on its merits and what it says as a recommendation.
Okay, that helps.
Okay, thank you.
And so, I just want to, what you just said, so 177 units, then 177 parking stalls?
That's the requirement.
Okay, and so that can tie back to the B3 discussion that we've had and those types of things. Okay, I understand, okay.
And then the other stuff that we have to think about then is the big idea of village gardens. And that's really not a city thing, but it's important here. So.
And when it was approved by the Planning Commission and the city as a PUD, right? So it's an alteration to what was previously approved.
Right.
So the variation was approved once before at a higher level. Right?
That
Am I
triggers the
understanding that?
question then, is there a parking matrix for this PUD? So, I mean, similar to other things that we've seen on other sites, like this building has 100 stalls, this one has.
Yeah, no, the parking requirements of the B3 and the R3 apply to those districts. Unless there's something else mentioned, like with this one. where it's
Right, so
1.5.
this
Right. So
development.
the commercial, yes, so in the commercial area, it's the B3 parking requirement, 1 space per 600 square feet of floor area.
Okay.
There was no adjustment that I'm aware of to that. Okay.
And no chart that said these lots have this much parking, so therefore the entire unit needs 1,000 stalls or whatever. Nothing like that was done for this development
No.
or PUD. Okay, thank you. That
No.
was my question.
Yeah, that development plan that was in your packet, that contains the parking requirements. And so I think there's a section that talks about parking and signage, and all it talks about is signs. So the only adjustments to parking are those that you find on those specific use type pages for, in this case, use type J or G or whichever it was. For apartments, it says 1.5 spaces per dwelling unit. Most don't have any special parking requirement like that.
So just to that point, so I understand it, because I do see the matrix, that is referring to what was put in the PUD or some other standard, which I see in a lot in building standards.
Which matrix? I don't.
So in the Village Garden Development Packet, yes, that one. Don't know if you can see that, but.
It's on page 117, it's 117.
Is that a parking matrix? Page what is it?
117 of our packet.
Page what of the development
Oh, where do
plan?
you guys see that?
It's 117, page.
Okay, so if the page that you referenced earlier was.
There should also be a page number for.
15.
15.
There it is, right there, yeah.
Mine didn't print. The page numbers for the Village Gardens didn't print.
Okay, sorry, yes, sorry, okay.
No worries.
Yes, that did follow the sign regulations. That's what you're referring to. And that's the extent, that's the extent of it.
But just for reference purposes, for multifamily apartments, it says 1.5, right? And is that based on PUD or building standards?
The 1.5 that's shown here is above what the zoning ordinance requires for the B3 district. The zoning ordinance only requires 1.
Right, okay.
This had a higher standard for reasons I think they described.
Just one quick question. Building permit wise, when that goes through, do they look at this site independently? It has its own site boundaries and everything? Okay, thank you.
Yep. It would have to provide whatever parking is required by
On that.
the development plan or the matrix.
Okay. Any other staff questions? No? Okay, thank you. The applicant rebuttal, please.
Thank you. Yeah, Brad's going to jump in quick because he has to leave. So I guess he gets priority.
Last one in, first one out.
So I'll try to stay in my lane here, present a couple of facts. I think, Dennis, you asked a really good question, contemplating this going back, what it looked like back in 2004. Are we maintaining some of that character? Some of it's ambiguous. I mean, what are we looking at? The original plan did contemplate hundreds of apartments within Village Gardens. This is standalone buildings. This is retail with apartments above it, which will obviously be 2- and 3-story, possibly 4 if they were meeting the standard within the PUD. The height for the commercial and the mixed-use area, I want to point out, is 50 feet. That, particularly to the architecture that is out there, roof lines and so forth, is to midpoint. That means the peak of those buildings could certainly be way above 50 feet. So you talk about the character, set apart the architectural side and what that may look like. It's still to be seen, I think. You've got several lots to the north of this lot that are still undeveloped that may be able to meet these standards that are still in the PUD for the mixed-use area that may be just as much in height. That's what this waiver is requesting. So with that, I'll go ahead.
Questions for Brad before he has to go? One question then, Brad. From the standpoint of this site alone, if we look at some of the math that we've talked about being in the center and underneath, how many stalls do we have on site only for this apartment complex?
Sam's, I think, going to cover
Yeah.
that, right?
Okay?
Yeah.
Then Brad,
Sam's
you're
got
off
his
the
math,
hook.
and he's going to cover
Okay.
that.
Thanks, Brad.
Thank you very much.
I want to say just a couple things, and then I'll turn over the
Perfect.
rebuttal
We'll
show to
save that.
Sam. But so, yeah, I'm working with the development team here who has experience in the city of Lincoln and our quality developers, right? So there's been no intent to deceive. There's been no intent to, do anything to the neighbors other than be upfront and try to work through a process. There was a letter sent to people within 200 feet of the project, which would be typically who the planning department would send notice to. Probably what we did not do was probably make appropriate notification to the neighborhood association. And I think that's probably the folks who, when they found out about planning commission, got excited. And of course, what did we do? When our neighbors got excited, we asked for a deferral so we would have time to sit down and visit with them. We did have a meeting that was well attended by the neighbors, and Sam stood up there and took everything they had to throw at him, right? And it wasn't as nice as what we heard here today, but did it, listened, went back, made some adjustments, and the only adjustment was not just a 4-unit reduction. We also added an additional 25 stalls on the site, okay? So there were some adjustments that were made in response to the neighbors, along with the efforts to go out and talk one-on-one to a lot of neighbors and explain the situation about additional parking that's being added, yet this year. So we're working in good faith, trying to come up with a plan that's going to work for everybody in the community, and that would be the goal of this development team. So I'm going to turn it over and let Sam hit a couple things on the parking.
So I think your question was how many stalls are on the site specifically?
I got to pop it up here yet.
Pull up. There are 208 stalls on the site, underground and on surface. Oops.
There you go. Zoom.
There we go.
Adjust.
Specifically,
There you go.
Specifically for this unit, correct? So
Specifically within the boundaries of this lot, there are 208 parking stalls that are dedicated to this parking. To this apartment
That are in the
complex.
green?
That are in
Yes.
green.
So that's below and above 208.
Correct.
Got it.
Yes.
Thank you.
And then when you add the 50, I can't remember the exact number, 52 stalls, I believe it is, on the Cross Lake Lane and the 18 immediately adjacent to the north, that's where we get to that 1.45 roughly parking ratio. And what our hope is that it doesn't add any additional pressure to that association. I do have a couple images from those weekends that are busy there at the Village Gardens area. This is Bobley Lane. This is taken at 5:30 on Friday, April 30th. And keep in mind, at 5:30 on a Friday, Campbell's is still open. This is spring. It was a beautiful sunny night, and the patio was busy at Hero and Local. I mean, they were having great business. And so Bobley Lane, there's not much going on there. And then Cross Lake Lane, kind of the same thing. There's a few cars on Cross Lake Lane, where you see that little driveway piece there. That's where we're adding the additional parking stalls along the street there. There's somebody parked here with this big tractor trailer and somebody parked sideways. So the demand on that parking on one of arguably the busiest nights. I mean, again, we talked to the manager over at Local. He said that was their single busiest night to date, that particular night. And the parking demand on that area right there, where we're expecting our apartment residents to spill into, wasn't being used that much at that point in time. So we think that would be available. And then, as we talk about the commercial area, as I mentioned before, we have vested interests in the success of these businesses. I personally have worked with a number of these business owners, Lulubi, Home Health, Lindell, everybody in that, the Scooters building, and now the Mindy's people, I don't want to do anything in there to negatively impact their businesses. I personally believe that we have enough parking in this area. I have developed my own parking matrix. We have developed our own parking matrix, which the city would have required us to do at the time of building permit. And we believe we are overparked once this is complete with these footprints as they are shown by over 200 parking stalls. And that's kind of at a standard ratio. It's 217 to be specific. And that's using 1.5 parking stalls per apartment unit, assuming you use a cross-access easement. There has been some questions about Campbell's parking. Campbell's are open to opening that parking out. They just keep it closed down, especially during the seasons, because they've got their mulch and different plant materials all sitting out there, and they don't want the stuff to get stolen. But they operationally, they're willing to make changes to that, to improve that, the use of that parking area. That's about all I have.
Okay, I think there was one question just brought up with respect to the church, and I think all they did was grant the church a cross-parking access. They're outside of the, village center, but typically a church is an offsetting use, right? And if we ever do shared parking arrangements, it makes sense to let them on Sundays use parking because of overflow into a commercial area that's not necessarily using it on that morning. So that, when I read through that document, that's really what it is
So it wasn't really specific to a particular area?
It was, I mean, it gave them cross-parking
Into
rights
that-
in this area and
right.
indicated that a certain number of stalls would be built there, and everything that's being planned and done is in accordance with that agreement.
And it's
for what's
probably in
being
that
built
yellow
there.
area that's already available?
Yeah, that,
It's this area
and then some more of the
specifically.
blue.
And I believe the way the argument, or the agreement was written is that we had to have a certain number, like 150 stalls, and it couldn't change by a certain percentage. We're actually going to have more than that because the original design had a grocery store sitting here in this site, but we're going to end up having another 100+ parking stalls on this plan that wasn't contemplated in that original design.
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so question, another kind of out there, maybe, I don't think it is. So I know at least pieces of every group or component that's involved in this. You are a great builder and developer. You're a great attorney. The neighborhood, I know many of the neighbors, they're great people. I know the owner of the development. Dick's a great person. You all are fantastic people, and you all care about this deeply, this place. You're not together yet. It doesn't seem to me like you're together yet. If you're together, these are easy votes. You're not together yet. Between now and when this gets to a point where you start putting, concrete in the ground, what can you continue to do to get everybody who loves this place, this development, together on the same page?
It's a great question. And I've tried asking that a few times. I'm concerned that there's, and it kind of came up earlier, that the issue with the current parking situation and the impact on the businesses, because there's a big demand, is kind of clouding the overall plan that we're trying to accomplish here. I'm using the example of the CIP project because CIP has built thousands of apartments throughout the Midwest, and if they're using a 1.35 or 1.4 ratio on their site, and if we can do the same thing on our site and keep our parking more condensed to our area, it shouldn't have an impact on that commercial area other than more people to frequent those businesses in the area. I'm willing to work with the Campbell family on improving the parking situation. We've talked about the different pedestrian access points and adding additional parking to that center area now so that it helps to alleviate the pressure, and then also look at the future uses of those new buildings. Those are areas that we're trying to make a case for to
hopefully get everybody.
Are you
on the same
willing to
page.
continue to work on the architecture too? Because I think the architecture, it isn't just height. I think height's part of it, but it's a scale problem, it's a mass problem. Are there things that you're willing to maybe take input from? I mean, you have some people in the neighborhood that I think care about this a lot. Can you work with them? I mean, it's not too late, is it?
Sure, no, it's not too late. I'm one member of a three-person team, and so I
Okay.
can't speak for them. So those are
But if you are, it matters.
Yeah,
is
I
my
mean,
point.
those are things that we can take into consideration. One of the big issues right now is construction costs, and so if
Right.
we're talking about adding a whole bunch more stone to the building, that's going to be really difficult. But we can definitely have those conversations. We have not gone through the architectural review committee yet.
Right.
We've shown Dick some images. He's made a few comments, but there's not been anything decided yet.
Yeah, and I don't, it wasn't my intention when I asked the question about the review committee to cast any kind of negative opinion about that. I respect everybody who's involved with this in terms of their architectural ability to make a good decision or good decisions, so.
Sure.
I think that would really help if you guys could keep working at it. I don't know if everybody was involved with the project when we voted on the Knowles project. Tracy, maybe you were around?
Yeah.
I think Planning Commission kept pushing and pushing developer and residents to work together, and I think it really turned out well. It went a long ways from what originally came here, and hopefully that could happen here too, so.
Anything else? Let's talk just a little bit more about the height, because that's one of the things. What are some ideas that you can have to reduce that scale? Because you've talked about the fact that it slopes and changes elevations approximately 10 to 12 feet from top to bottom. So to help address that even further from our standpoint of approving additional height, what are some things that we can do to help the people concerned?
It's in order to get the same number of units, it's going to be difficult because we're trying to create all that parking underneath the building. There can be some treatments to the outside of the building that could potentially lower the overall height of it, and that's something we could work with our architects on, but I can't commit to having any design changes of it without working with them on that. So other than pulling that whole corner back and maybe taking off a few units on top, which at this point we're not willing to do, there are some other architectural things that could soften it to make it look more like the English Cotswolds that could have a positive impact on its height in that location.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I'll entertain a motion to close the public hearing.
Moved.
Go ahead.
Moved?
Second.
Thank you.
Edgerton.
Okay. To close the public hearing on changes zone 04075I. Ball,
Yes.
Edgerton,
Yes.
Joy,
Yes.
Ryman Yost.
Yes.
Share.
Yes.
Motion carried 5-0.
Okay, now a motion and a second to discuss.
Move approval, Edgerton.
I'll second Ryman Yost. Open for discussion.
Yeah. me too. That's
Excellent,
where I
thank
went.
you. Okay, who wants to start?
So I just have a question. So there's two revisions in front of us, right? One for the height and one for the parking changes. And do we approve both collectively or have a
So the
choice on
motion
each
was
one?
to approve it as it was presented, which would include both. If we wanted to approve just one, that would be done by amendment
Okay,
to the motion, correct?
okay.
Okay. Do you want to start? Sure.
I didn't want to start, but I will. I was going to speak, but I didn't want to start. So what I'm dealing with is how me as an individual or us as a planning commission can make this the best project that it can be in this neighborhood, in this development, in this place. I don't think it's there yet. What I'm working through is, does voting against this motion help it get there? Or can it get there with a positive vote for the motion? So I'm not, there was a lot of testimony about cross-parking and the impact of parking. I think there is an impact on parking. I don't have the same kind of opinions about, or negativity about the cross-parking that some of the testimony that we heard has. I think that that is part of what makes Village Gardens unique, is that cross-parking element, or that character. So that doesn't bother me that much. I do not believe that this is a site that is a typical urban site that is able to support high density without some real thought here. So I think it's a cross between an urban and suburban site. So I tend to think that more parking is better here. It sounds like Sam is willing to keep working with that. The height bothers me, again, not because I'm against height adjustments. We've made those in the past. I've supported those. I think it's not a bad thing. We supported those in places similar to this that are in more of a suburban location. I do think that's a good thing, but the mass, the scale, and the effect of the height, again, at this place, does bother me. So I personally think that there's a way to make the adjustment to height work, but it's going to take some work on everybody's part and some commitment to that. So right now, unless you guys convince me otherwise, I think I'm sort of barely on the line of supporting this. Because I think it can go forward and it can be a great project. But I just hope everybody is true to what they have said they would continue to work with, so. That's just where I'm at.
Dennis's insightful questions and his broad view of this, which he's demonstrated throughout the hearing, has really helped me think about this development and think about what this means in the context of what has been brought to us, which is that, this housing development can go forward as is, but for needing the height waiver and the adjustment with regard to parking. And we've had lots of conversation today about what both of those mean. Again, as Dennis pointed out, the waiver to height has been approved before, and I understand why it makes sense at this spot, given elevations and frankly, because it needs to be an economically feasible project. I have some other concerns, but with regard to it being a waiver on the edge of the development, and with regard to the holistic conversation we have had with regard to parking, I think there's more room to work with what's been presented, and I will vote to approve this. The density, the parking, the safety, the traffic, those are all the things that are kind of encompassed into the concerns here. Everyone wants a great project and in a great area of our community. And I'm still hopeful that can move forward in a way that will enhance and add to the development.
So I have a few comments.
Okay.
Similar to Commissioner Scheer, great project. I think as a commissioner, this is my first time seeing such a mixed development, which is really interesting, and personally experienced it with my family and kids and love it, right? But I know that what's being proposed to be built compared to parking has, is congruent, right? There's some relation. And I don't necessarily have a concern with the height, but I do think the parking could potentially be an issue for residents and business there. And that's the part I'm struggling with. If it is the number of units compared to the parking associated, it's going to be a potential problem. And, I'm really on the line, if it is together, being voted together, of not necessarily voting yes to move forward with it.
I guess, are you planning to introduce an amendment to split them at this point?
Personally, I would recommend splitting them at this point.
We would entertain an amendment motion if you would like. We can get some
Yes.
Robert Rules of Order here if we'd like.
So, David Carey with the Planning Department, 555 South 10th Street. The way that, if you're going to do that, the order would be to move an amendment, get a second, and then discuss, and then take a vote on that amendment. Just for clarification, because you are only at 5 voting members, you're at the minimum for the quorum, but an amendment can actually pass by majority vote of those present, just so everybody understands those rules. But, so that's the order. If we're going to start discussing something different, you need to make that motion to amend.
Okay. So I would like to make a motion to amend. And I have to state the actual, amend the revision to the height and parking waiver. Is that appropriate?
I had Tim come up just to be careful. I think what you should do, just for clarity, mention what your intention is as far as what you mean by the height and what you mean by the parking, so that it's not ambiguous at this time. Through the discussion, if there's some differences there, you might be able to have a friendly amendment to the motion at that point, if there's something different at the end of the discussion, but you need to kind of put it on the record what you're proposing.
Okay, proposing to amend the height change from, amend, I'm sorry, let me just get this right, give me 1 second. Amend the height change from 45 to 50. As well as, the parking from 1.5 to 1. So split the request, the change request.
So you want to split it into 2 separate votes?
2 separate votes.
Here comes Tim.
Okay.
This is when it gets fun. I think what I'm hearing is you let's be clear what's in the proposal. As I understand it, there is a proposal to change the existing 1.5 to 1 for parking ratios per dwelling unit, and then there is a proposal, in the proposal it is to take the height from 40 to 55 on this.
40 to 55, okay.
For this use, correct?
Correct.
Commissioner Ball, what I hear you saying is, I think that you would propose to amend to recommend denial of the change from the parking ratio, to leave it at 1.5 as opposed to reducing it to 1. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, so I think you can, and this is all to be kept in mind, this is a recommendation to the City Council. All of this goes forward, so this is not final action. But that being said, I think the motion on the overall would be a motion to amend the proposal to accept or to deny the waiver of the parking requirement and leave it at 1.5 for multifamily use. Does that sound?
That's correct.
Like what you're?
Yes.
Okay.
Can I just But then we don't need to address the height at all because it's already part of the,
I think.
Is that right?
What I hear is that there's a thought to splitting this up.
Okay.
And voting on these two items separately. So what I'm trying to do is create a motion that addresses the parking issue first.
I gotcha.
We'll vote on that, assuming there's a second, which I haven't heard yet.
Right.
And then we'll get to if there's a change in the height requirements. So I've heard a motion to recommend denial of the waiver on the parking requirement and leave the requirement at 1.5 per dwelling unit for multifamily, the multifamily use within the PUD.
As long as that's what your intention is, then we would need a second on that motion.
Okay, second ball.
Well,
That's your motion.
You made the motion, so is there a second?
Can't get up that easy, huh?
No, you're the first. Okay, so we have a motion, as stated. Is there a second?
I'll second just so we can discuss and vote.
Okay, excellent.
I'm just going to stay up here.
Yeah,
That's a good idea.
Good idea.
Okay, more discussion.
So, the first thought I have is that and I'm just thinking out loud here, that this is not, don't think this is giving you any ideas about how I might vote on this. I think that the height and the parking adjustments are connected in some ways. If we approve this motion to deny the parking adjustment, we are increasing the amount of parking that needs to be provided to a point where maybe the height doesn't matter anymore. It's not a feasible project. That's what I'm getting at. So I just want, that's the first thing that I think everybody needs to realize here, whether that's right or wrong. And I'm frankly glad you made the motion because I think that this is something we should talk about. So I don't really know how to vote on this yet. I just wanted to get that out there. And I actually that may actually make me more comfortable with this. But again, don't take that as something that I'm going to.
It seems like it's likely, though, that it's needed for the project to move forward.
Yeah.
And so if we're going to deny that requirement, I mean, the project in itself wouldn't be able to move forward, would get it in front of the city council and have
Right.
for further discussion either way.
Right. And I think the other thing is that it in some ways makes the developer and the designer to be a little more creative in trying to accommodate some of these issues that we have. And if it can be done creatively, I think that's probably a good thing. So, anyway.
I appreciate Commissioner Scheer's use of the word creative in terms of the problem solving, because I think one of the things that really stands out about this development is that it is a creative use of the land, and that, the live-work spaces and the, expansion of commercial spaces. And it does, I think, has a unique character that doesn't exist in much of our city. So the idea of finding some creative solutions, I don't think anybody loves an empty lot, and I think I heard consistently from the people that are living and working in the neighborhood that no one is opposed to the idea of apartment being added in that space, and in fact is looking forward to, increasing the population and diversity of their neighborhood. But I do think, different than some other changes that we have considered in the past, it's complicated, where often sorry, I didn't think that quite through how I was going to say that out loud, but very often we can say it's pretty cut and dried, like, well, I'm sorry people don't like it, but this is the rules and this is what's existing in city code, and so there you go. And those are not always those difficult decisions for me. This one, because of the development agreement that people were moving into this area and building homes or establishing businesses based around that development agreement, and then to change that, I do think complicates this in ways that some of our previous decisions have not.
Yeah. That's well said.
That's well said, yes. Mhm. Okay, any other discussion? Okay, I think, yeah, and from my standpoint, I think that all ties back to it. It's all goes hand in hand. The height ties to the parking. So from my standpoint, I'm not sure how I want to vote on the amendment to separate it out.
Yeah.
So,
But here we are.
and here we are, and it's time to call a motion. Jerry?
Okay, this is for the motion to amend, or the motion made by Ball to recommend denial of the request for the reduction in the parking requirement from 1.5 to 1 stall per unit. Okay. Ball?
Yes.
Campbell, or I'm sorry, Edgerton?
No.
Joy?
No.
Ryman Yost?
No.
Shear?
Yes.
Motion failed 3-2.
So we're back to the original.
2-3, actually.
Yes, the original motion to approve is still
On the table.
on the table.
And for me, I think, and I really appreciate all the efforts everyone has made, because like we've all been saying, everyone wants success with this. It's a great thing for the city of Lincoln, and great people are involved. For me, fundamentally, I think that the B3 with the parking probably doesn't bother me as much if we can do a standalone one-to-one. It's the height that is the problem that I think needs to be worked out further. And so, unfortunately, I will not be supporting the motion. Because of that, I will be a no. But from a parking standpoint, I was okay with the,
Which means we're going to vote on this again next time.
sorry, but
Somebody else.
Okay, so so everybody that, especially those that aren't usually involved in this, so we need 5 votes, one way or another, to move it forward to the city council. This will go to the city council eventually. It's a change of zone. So I think at this point, unless there are other recommendations for motions to amend, I think that you probably need to vote on the main motion and see what the vote is. And we would be moving, if we do not get 5 votes one way or another, we would have to carry it over to the next hearing and see what the mix is of the commissioners at that point. It may not be too much different as far as numbers are concerned. So we'll just have to keep working through the process.
I'll be absent at the next
Yeah, we
one.
have a commissioner absent on the 9th.
And that's okay. It is what it is. It's the process we have at hand, so.
Yep.
Any other discussion that you want to have, or motions to amend? No? Okay.
Okay, this is for the conditional approval of change of zone 04075I. Ball?
No.
Edgerton?
Yes.
Joy?
No.
Ryman Yost?
No.
Shear?
Yes.
Okay, motion failed for lack of 5 affirmative votes.
Okay, again, to just be clear that this item, while the public hearing will not carry over, that it's been closed, that we will have the action will be on the next agenda again, and we will take it up at that point.
Very good.
Okay, thank you so much. Okay, at this time, is there anyone wishing to speak on an item that is not on the agenda? You may do so at this time.
Move to adjourn. Edgerton.
Second, Ryman Yost.
Okay, Jerry?
Okay, Ball?
Yes.
Edgerton?
Yes.
Joy?
Yes.
Ryman Yost?
Yes.
Shear?
Yes.
Motion carried 5-0.